My guest today is a teacher, folklorist, and the author of several books. She's well known for her work on the subject of Appalachian Folk Magick, and in this interview, we're going to talk about just that. Plus, her views on community, ideas for keeping our lives magical, and of course, her latest book, A Feral Church. Allow me to introduce Byron Ballard. Welcome to Music, Myth, and Magic. I'm Eric Arcadian, and today I am speaking to author, folklorist, and teacher Byron Ballard. Byron, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, I am honored that you're here, and just to kind of get some of the basic stuff out of the way, could you tell me a little bit about how you found yourself on this magical path?
Well, I've always been here, weirdly enough. I mean, now I self-identify with the word animism, that I'm an animist. But I think I always was, and I think most children are, because they understand that everything has a soul. And it's not just, their dogs and cats have souls, but that the green beans on the table have a soul, and the birds and the rocks. And kids get that in a way that it takes grown-ups sometimes a little detangling to get to. So I grew up in the country, I always say in West by God, Buncombe County, North Carolina. And because of that, I grew up on the slopes of a mountain and spent a lot of time outside. That was the 60s when kids could be told to go outside and play, and they would just leave for hours and hours, and parents didn't worry so much. So in doing that and living that way, I came into what felt to me like a really deep accord with the world around me. Now, I was lucky on two levels. One is that my grandmother and that whole family line were referred to themselves in a non-pejorative way with the word witch. And that was all about herbal abilities and the ability to make do and things like second sight, precognitive dreaming, which when I was growing up was called by various names. So there were a whole set of abilities that I was told would come my way when I became a woman, when I started my period. And so that was true. There's a beautiful nestling basket within my family tradition. And I'm finding now that I'm an elder, both in my tradition and in my family, that there are people in the family that are coming to me, different parts of the family who come to me and go, so tell me about the family stuff, because my mom won't tell me or my grandpa won't tell me. And so I talk in very kind of simple terms about what I understand the family legacy is in that area. So I've been called a witch forever. I've been an out witch forever. Somewhere, I think in sophomore year of high school, I ran with a bunch of very smart theater kids and artists and, the school weirdos. And someone signed my yearbook to the communist witch who's the head of the mafia. So I probably am no longer communist and never was in the mafia, but the witch piece has been around then verbally and in yearbooks since then. So that's the Appalachian piece of it. I also, the other amazing and happy for me thing is that I grew up unchurched, which is the Appalachian way of saying that my father had some kind of argument with the preacher at the church, and the family left, and they never found another church home. So as a result of that, I sometimes sang at my grandmother's church in the children's choir, but I was never baptized, and I was never a regular churchgoer. And that opened me wide up to look at religion in lots of ways that I think the generation before mine didn't have the luxury to do. And I'm going to stop there. That I can keep going, but I'm going to stop there.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of interesting things there that you just brought up. First of all, I can definitely get down with an animist vibe. And I think it's a great point that you made, that probably a lot of children are natural animists. I think my first introduction to, like, by title, animism, right, was a couple of years ago with Nathan Hall's book, Path of the Moonlit Hedge. And prior to that, I had never really looked into kind of like what the fundamentals of animism are. But as soon as I read some stuff about it, I'm thinking like, yeah, like I've always aligned with most of those things. And I think kids really can kind of get behind that too, that there's a spirit inside, you know, everything that we're working with. So that's interesting. I also find it very interesting that simultaneously, you know, in your childhood, you're in a church, right? And you're also being told that you're going to have these abilities that are going to come to you later. And that is just so different from my experience growing up in the church, because those sort of things that you're talking about, you know, like prophetic dreams or whatnot, it probably would have been labeled as like a demon or something, you know, like in my family with that form of conservative Christianity. So it's really interesting that mix and blend of beliefs, which, you know, a lot of people would probably call Appalachian folk magic. And I'm kind of curious on that topic. What do you feel are some misconceptions about Appalachian folk magic?
Well, with any kind of magic or any kind of cultural stuff, I guess I have to start by saying Appalachia is a huge region. It goes from northern Georgia and Alabama all the way into Canada. So within that sphere, there are lots of different kind of cultures and cultural expressions of both folk healing and folk magic. That being said, what I'm going to say now comes out of my family, my practice, and the people that I know who have been here a long time. And some of those things are, it is not called granny magic. And it has never been called granny magic until somebody got hold of that and thought that was a thing to call it. It has always been a practice without a name. And the word granny has often been used as a title of respect for older women. So I think there was the thought to put those two things together and call it granny magic, but it's such a misnomer. Because for one thing, it's not just grannies that practice it. When I was coming up, a lot of it was based in the female side of the family. But the understanding about a lot of things was that, like, for instance, water witching, dowsing, was believed to be a male thing. It was mostly men who did that. And I don't know if that was, if you could count it up and most of the people who did it were men, or if because of the culture saying only men do that women who had a natural ability to douse went, yeah, but I need to find a woman's thing because that dowsing is really a man's thing. So that the idea that it's only old women or it's only granny women or whatever is it's an important thing for us to look at and to discard. The other thing is the word magic and the word witch. I started, since 6 years ago now, I started calling myself a spell catcher. Just like the old song catchers of 100 years ago who came into the Appalachian Mountains and they heard these songs on people's porches. And they came back to say, I know that song. That's Barbara Allen. That's a child ballad from England from 1645. I know that ballad. So the thing that is important to remember about this culture is that it comes out of a firmly Protestant tradition. So you were talking about how you were raised in a very conservative church. My raising was in and out, I guess, of a Methodist church. My mother's family were Methodist. My father's family were Baptists. And because I became interested in where the origins of this folk magic came from, that's why I decided to be a spell catcher like the old song catchers. And I've been studying in a lot of places with a lot of people. I love to talk about the border reivers between Scotland and northern England. And I go there about every 2 or 3 years and I do field research in that area. And I'll be going back next year, taking a group of people with me. So it's the Scots, the Irish, the Northern English, and then it's the Pennsylvania Dutch, the Dutch people, and then we come down the valley of the Shenandoah, and it's the Cherokee and the Shawnee and the Creek. So there are so many influences on this folk magic, but almost all of them just believed it was an ability that was given to them by God. It was the Holy Spirit moving within them. So that the other thing I really want to impress on people is that the people who traditionally practice this, and there are a lot of people who practice it that's not very traditional, and I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it's not traditional. But the people who practice this in a traditional way, and maybe they follow a family tradition of it, they are incredibly humble in what they do because they understand that it's not them doing it. It is a greater spirit that moves through them. And I think in a lot of folkish magical traditions, that's how people feel, that it's the work of the saints, it's the work of Jesus, it's the work of other spiritual entities that are working through the hands and the heart and the mind of the practitioner. And so I wrote my first book in 2012, I think. I just wanted to write down the stuff I knew because I thought it was fading. In Appalachia, we have a lot of people moving into the area, maybe fewer after a giant hurricane hits, but we have people moving into the area, and the culture itself is fading. And I wanted to make sure that funny old cool stuff was still around, that it was written down. And what I found out when I went on the book tour for that book, and I went to Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, is that there's still plenty of people that do exactly these same practices, but they don't have a Facebook page and they don't hang out a shingle. People in their community know, oh, my daughter's pregnant. Now I'm going to take her over and she's going to talk to Miss Jones because Miss Jones knows all about catching babies. And so there is this sense in this community of who can do what. Now, men, generally speaking, don't do any of that birthing stuff. I've never met a man who does either fertility work or birth work. And I think that that's a certain conservatism in the culture's part. Because, of course, now we have doctors and midwives and whatever who are not women. But I think in old school Appalachia, that would have seemed strange and inappropriate. What else should I tell you about that? So it's not called anything at all. If you want to, the name that it classifies it for anthropological studies is Appalachian Folk Magick. It has a lot of different names depending on who the practitioner is, but magic is odd. I mean, that's a word they probably didn't use. And as I do my research on it, Methodists often will use the word witch in a non-pejorative way. Baptists never use it. I've never met a Baptist family that welcomed the word witch as something they would accrue to their family. Now, and I've not studied any other branches, but I suspect the Pentecostals, I would think they would not use the word witch, but I've not really researched that yet. So those are the things I would like people to know, that it's not just women. It often comes through families, but what has happened to us now is as Christianity has become more conservative in these regions, that people are being told, as you said earlier, oh no, don't do that. That is the devil's work, and that will send you straight to hell. So that I encounter people all the time who are in their 30s or 40s, and they go, it used to be I would see spirits and I engage with them. I could talk to them, but I was told that that was dangerous and that they could take my soul away from me. And so I stopped it. I repressed it. And now I want to get it back. And that's not easy to do. So if you had a natural gift for this kind of ability, and you spent 20 years repressing it because you were told by the preacher or your family that that was something that was dangerous, then when you get to be 35 or 40 years old and you would like to re-engage with that prophetic dreaming, it can be very hard because you're trying to bypass years of, I guess I'll call it propaganda about how dangerous that is. But you also may be flying in the face of what your family feels safe with, so that you can become an outcast in the family. If they've already warned you, this is a dangerous, bad thing and you should not do it, then there are family dynamics that come into play.
Wow, there's a lot there. Something that's really interesting is that it almost feels like as soon as you use the label Appalachian Folk Magick, you're doing it from an outside perspective.
Yes.
Like you've already set yourself on the outside looking in, because somebody that's on the inside, they're not using those words. That's just what you do.
Yeah.
You don't need a word for it. That's just what you do. Yeah. So that's interesting. A bit sad though that as communities get more conservative, some of those gifts, some of those sets of knowledge might be, I don't know, would you feel like they're kind of dying out?
I don't know. I mean, it is a sad thing to think that we're losing that, and obviously that was my impetus for writing my first book. But I talk to a lot of young people, youngish people. And an example I'll give you is a woman came in. I read tarot at a local metaphysical shop once a week. And this woman came in and I asked what I ask all my clients. So what are you looking for today? And she said, I'm looking to find out whether or not I'm crazy. And I went, that is way above my pay grade, but sit down, tell me what's happening, and we'll lay out the cards and see what they say. And she started listing what I think of now as those Scots-Irish abilities. So her first thing is, I dream dreams and they come true about 3 days later. I see ghosts and I can communicate with them and I can send them to where they need to go. I know things there's no way I should know. I know things that happen far, far away. And I can lay my hands. My grandma has terrible headaches, and I can lay my hands on either side of her head and touch her ears, and I can cure her headaches. So it was a whole litany of those things, and she had them actively. But because she had never had any training in any of that, she thought she was going crazy. So I said, okay, first, I can't tell you whether or not you're going crazy, but I can tell you this. What you're talking about is a set of abilities that are often found in people from the mountains. Where are your people from? And she said, my people are from McDowell County. And I said, before McDowell County, where are your people from? And she said, my people are Scotch-Irish. And I said, exactly. So it seems to be there is a dominant strain of this among the Scots-Irish people. They're also called the Ulster Scots. And their migratory pattern out of the British Isles is fairly well documented. And so when I told her that, I said, all of that stuff is perfectly normal for our people. And if there's a way you can practice that feels safe to you, that is not going to get you in trouble with your family or your husband or any of that, then I encourage you to learn more about those abilities. But if it is going to be a danger to you, then you need to be quiet about it. And I think people are told that all over the world all the time about abilities that don't fit into the dominant culture. And I saw her actually about 6 months ago. Well, a little more than that. It was pre-hurricane. And she had talked to her grandmother, the one that had the headaches. She had talked to her, and she had taken my advice about don't ask your elder relatives about witchcraft. Don't use that word. Say to them, what is that old stuff that the people out in the country used to do, that old superstitious stuff? Because that will give her a place to open up and talk about it in a way that doesn't feel like you're pointing a finger. And she did that. So she cured her grandma's headache, which her grandma loved that she had that ability. And they got into more and more conversations about what this granddaughter could do besides cure grandma's headaches. And as it came out, that had been in the family line as far back as anybody could remember. That's what the family did. But when they moved into town, when they left the country and moved to town, that just seemed like some weird old-fashioned stuff, and we're just not going to do that anymore. But this child in this family, I say child, she's probably 22 or 23. The child in this family had just this glorious gift, and by talking to her grandmother, she found out it was absolutely natural. It's something that probably travels down on somewhere on the DNA. And they came to an accord about what it was. And the grandmother was very clear that this is not you, so you don't get the big head about this. This is not you with some kind of magic powers. This is you as a vessel for the healing of the Holy Spirit. And that's the way the grandmother needs to look at it. And that's okay. That's okay. Because she can fold that right into her Southern Baptist life and her Southern Baptist sensibilities, that there are certain people who are channels and vessels for the Holy Spirit. And often they come out as preachers. So they're preaching in a small church somewhere or a big church. But for women, it is harder because they're not expected to be able to hold these kind of abilities in a way that doesn't somehow hurt their family. So it's a tricky road to walk, but a lot of people are walking it right now. And I hear from a fair number of them, which is really gratifying to know.
That is so interesting. Definitely does sound like a tricky path for some of those folks to walk. Now, you've touched a little bit on the first book you wrote, but you did have a book come out very recently, correct?
Yes. 3 months ago, January the 2nd.
So what can you tell us about that book?
My friend said that you can track the path of my own spiritual progress through my books. So my first 2 books were Appalachian Folk Magick books, just almost anthropological, but with some stories, because I'm an Appalachian storyteller after all. And then the most recent book, which is book number 8, is called A Feral Church. And that has grown out of so many influences. I like to say that the origin story of A Feral Church happened at Wisteria. Do you know the campground Wisteria where they do Starwood and a bunch of other festivals in Southern Ohio?
I've heard of it. Mm-hmm. I've heard of it.
I was there for, I think it was Appalachian Summer Solstice, and I heard that Carol Christ had died, and I never worked with her. I only ever read her work and admired her because she was writing at the time when the concept of women's spirituality and the rise of the divine feminine was just perking up again in the 80s. So I have always felt like she is one of the foremothers of the modern goddess movement. And I know she had been sick for a while, and so it was not a surprise exactly that she had died, but it was a great grief and a sadness. And it made me think about all the wonderful books that had come out back in the day. And so I have about an 8-hour drive from Southern Ohio to get back to Asheville, North Carolina. And during that time, I was thinking about it's probably time for a new book on goddess theology. Wow, that'd be cool. I wonder who could write that. Huh. So for all the time I'm driving through the beauty that is West Virginia on Highway 77, I'm wrestling with myself about, golly, I'm thinking about the people that I know, my colleagues, which one of them would be ripe to do that kind of. Well, by the time I got to Virginia, I was saying, well, I am a writer and I have been a lifelong goddess worshiper, and I'm a founder of a goddess temple that is still very, very active. I mean, I could write that book. So I got home and started thinking about it, talking about it, going over it in my head. And so A Feral Church is a new book of goddess theology. And it is filled with a pilgrimage that starts at the beginning and takes us right to the end for this group of people. So it's written in first person plural, which is a tricky form to write in if you're a writer, in which we go to all these different places and we meet different kinds of beings, and we are finding our grounding in the concept of the primal mothers. And the very end of the book, in the epilogue, I talk about take what you've learned here and go forward. I need to be clear that A Feral Church is in fact a book, but it's not only a book. It's the tip of a spear of a movement that is redefining what worship community looks like. And it has been read by and has been lovingly approved of by Christian ministers, a rabbi, in addition to pagan folk, because so many people right now feel like mainstream church and the institutional church is a weight that keeps them from doing the work of their religious tradition. And they need a way to think about gathering as a spiritual group, whether it's a tiny group or not, gathering as that group to do the work that they are called to do without having to refer to a pastor or a bishop or a pope or all the way up the line of what that looks like. So that they can, if they are called to do a soup kitchen, that they don't have to go first to their pastor who has to take it up the chain of a religious command to get permission. They can just figure out where that soup kitchen could happen to get permission and to gather volunteers to do it. And so in addition to me wanting to say something important about the work of Carol Christ and to speak my own work about goddess theology, it is also a way to look at community in a way that feels healthy and wholesome, where as a small group you can tackle one thing and do it well. And as I like to say about it, we're going into into the institutional church. And what is that thing where you open the door and see all the people? There's some kind of a hand thing about here is the church, here is the steeple. The whole point of the movement is that we go into the institutional church or mosque or synagogue and we take out what works. So we are taking out, in this iteration, we're taking out the concept of the home church, that you can meet in a park. You don't have to meet in a building. You don't have to pay a preacher, all of that. And that as a home church, you can hone in on something and be both efficient and effective with it. We're taking out the concept. When was the last time you heard anyone talk about liberation theology? And we know the current Pope is a huge proponent of that, but even he doesn't talk about that anymore. So we're taking that out of this old institution that is now weak and not able to do the work it once was called to do. So that's what Feral Church is about. And the book has been out for about 3 months. And what's happening now is that people send me emails and they go, okay, this is what I'm doing. So my friends and I are really into a community garden. We have a community garden, and we are gathering in the people we need to make that garden a success. And one of them is one of our neighbors is all about composting. So we asked her to come in and teach us about composting to make the soil better in our community garden. And in the process of doing that, they realized what they are doing is a sacred act. It doesn't make it holy because a preacher said words over it, or that there's a book somewhere that says, and now thou must compost in order to have really friable soil. They discovered that on their own while working in somebody's backyard or in a community garden in a food desert. So there they are doing their own sacred holy work. And they ask me, so is that a feral church? And the answer always so far has been, yes, that is a feral church. Thank you. And thank you for being feral. And thank you for following the spirit of your heart to do the work that you were called to do.
Wow, so much there. Okay, first of all, just so I can get it out of my head, because I think this is how it was when I was a kid. It was like, this is the church, this is the steeple, open the door and see all the people. I think that's how I had it as a kid.
Yeah.
All right, but
And
no,
then
what
you
you talk what what you're talking about is so cool. What makes something, is there a way to define that thing as a sacred act? What makes it a sacred act?
when you treat it as a sacred act.
Right.
When it's not just something you tick off the list, because that's going to make me look good in my community. That's going to help me as I'm running for office. Whatever the things are that mean that your soul and your heart are not engaged in the work. And I'm hearing from people all over the country, I would say all over the world, but just Britain at this point, about people who never thought what they were doing was churchy. Having a covered dish supper at a homeless shelter. And that because they are doing it with love and in a spirit of the sacred, becomes sacred. And I am a big believer, so I'll get on my soapbox just for a minute. When I go to a lot of festivals, and on Sunday, I'm always hearing people where they're packing up, putting the tent away, throwing out the tarp, going, oh no, now I have to go back to Mundania. I encourage everybody to remove the word mundane from their vocabulary. Because if you go to 2 festivals a year, which is what a lot of people, they can only do 2 because they get 2 weeks of vacation. If that's the only time you can really feel the blessing of the divine, the touch of the divine, if that's the only time you can be yourself is at a festival, then for 50 weeks out of the year, you are an imposter in your own life. So how about we don't use that mundane thing anymore? Because everybody who knows me has heard this so many times, but you don't know me, so I'm going to say it to you. You do not have to walk through the streets of your downtown in a long black cloak and a pentacle the size of a salad plate in order to practice your religion. Nothing wrong if you choose to do that. But if that's the only way that you can prove to yourself what your spirituality is, then I'm going to invite you to dig deeper into your spirituality. I'm going to invite you as a bank teller to know that as you're counting out that little old lady's Social Security money, that with every 20 you put on the counter, you bless her with abundance and grace and good health and happiness. And that's you practicing a religion. It's also you practicing witchcraft, and nobody would ever know. So mundane doesn't work for me. Mundania doesn't work for me because, I live in Appalachia. There's nothing mundane about it here. We are among the oldest mountains in the world, and 2 of the oldest rivers in the world flow through here. If I stood up right now, I could see the French Broad River, which flooded 6 months ago, which is the 3rd oldest river in the world. The only 2 rivers older are the Nile and the New River. And I drive over part of the New River when I visit my daughter who lives higher up in the mountains. So you think this place isn't filled with magic? It isn't filled with ancestors and spirits? It is constantly. You can barely get past them. So take away mundane, let it all be enchanted, because enchantment is also resistance, and that's what we need right now too.
I love all of that. I mean, making it a sacred act because you are making it a sacred act, right? I often tell people that every intentional act is a magical act.
Yes.
So we kind of go hand in hand there, and then we also have the philosophy that's very popular in the past couple decades of just like simple presence of mind or mindfulness. So all of these things really just kind of interweave and are more or less different ways to try to convey the same thing, to try to convey the importance of being intentional with what you're doing, and being in the moment, and making everything around you magical. But Byron, it's so hard sometimes. It is so hard when you come back from festival and you have to go back to, taking out the garbage and washing the dishes and driving the kids to school. It's hard. It's hard. What advice do you have for people just to, to help them better stay in those magical moments and not get lost in the mundania?
So wherever you are at a festival, take something with you that holds the magic, whether it's a stone or a stick from the woods, and be very conscious that all the magic that has rolled around me now for this entire festival, all the bliss and the deliciousness, I am putting into this object. I'm making a talisman, and take that talisman back with you. And every time you're washing the dishes and it starts to feel like, oh God, the dishes again, then touch that stone, touch that piece of wood and go, yeah, but you know what I'm doing right now? While I'm washing these dishes, I'm touching the entire DNA of my family. And how can I, while I'm washing dishes, say, what I'm washing away from my family is ill health. What I'm washing away from my family is sadness or anxiety. I'm washing all that away. And if you are consistent with all of that, then it becomes so simple. So I'm driving my kid to school, and this is me. This is me as the protector. This is me as the person with more skills in this area, and I am imparting that to the young people. I'm imparting that. And they're going to watch me get angry. They're going to watch me flip somebody off, but they're also going to watch me navigate tricky situations. And they're going to learn from that. So in that case, I'm being a mage for them. I'm being a sacred teacher for them. And it begins to just permeate everything like tomato sauce over pasta. I promise you that will work.
I love all of that. I really enjoy. Okay, no, later tonight, I promise, I am going to employ the dishwashing spell that you just told me. So I'm going to try that. We'll see how it works. I love that. There is such a simple change in perspective between doing something that is very boring and doing something intentionally or magically. But sometimes, simple is not always easy. Sometimes it's very simple, but it's very elusive. And it's like, I don't know which way to look at this thing to make it not suck. So it's really cool to hear some really simple ideas, easy ideas that that probably all of us can put into action. But I want to jump topics just a little bit, as much as I'm loving what we're talking about right now, because we're both going to be at Summer Magick a little bit later this year, right? So what are you teaching in your workshops?
I'm going to be talking about community, which I talk about all the time. And I mean, I would say my 2018 book, Earthworks, is about building community, but I've been talking about that for years. And people will say to me, "Oh, you're so lucky to live in such a vibrant pagan community." And I tell them it wasn't luck. We've been doing this for 30 years. We've been building this community brick by brick for 30 years. And before that, we made the bricks. So anybody can do it. You just have to be determined or stubborn or stupid or whatever it takes to do that. So I'll talk a lot about building community. I'm going to talk about ditching the word mundane and re-enchanting the totality of your life. But I also am going to sneak some Buddhist sentiments into that because I'm a great admirer of many facets of traditional Buddhism. One of them is the non-attachment to outcome, which as a magic worker, you have to be a little bit, you have to cheat on that one a little bit, because I want magic workers to be looking and observing to see if the magic worked. But in general, the non-attachment to how things are going to happen keeps us from levels of fear and anxiety that we would otherwise be kind of layered up in. So I'll talk about that. I'll talk about the book Feral Church and how you can start your own feral church or name the thing you're doing right now as your feral church.
That is a really interesting concept. The detachment from the results, and something that I have learned in my own personal magic, and it's not so much a detachment from the result itself, because I have a very specific goal in mind usually when I'm doing spell work. It's the lust for result is what interferes from me. It's the lust for result, and it instead replacing that lust for the thing with gratitude in the moment for the thing as if you already had it. So it's just a different, perspective switch. But that sounds all very cool. Are those workshops more of kind of a lecture based, or are they going to be a little interactive, ritual based?
Oh, yeah, I love for my workshops to be interactive. I don't think I'm doing any ritual for this one, but I often sneak them in. I'll like sneak in a guided meditation or sneak in a little ritual at the end, because I love ritual. I'm a big ritualist. But I don't know, because those classes are still in development. So the classes I'm doing are all new classes.
Very exciting. I understand. Yeah, I don't finish my workshops until 2 weeks or something before the actual festival date. So we're several months away. That doesn't need to be done yet.
Not yet. I got stuff before then.
Yeah. So we have talked about a couple of your books now, but you do have more. And I would like to hear just a little bit about you, about the other books that you've written.
Oh, thanks. Well, I have one more Appalachian Folk Magick book called Roots, Branches, and Spirits. That's the most recent folk magic book. I have a book called Embracing Willendorf, which is, the subtitle is A Witch's Way of Loving Your Body to Health and Fitness. No, it is not Witches Weight Watchers. It's listening to your body and giving your body what your body needs. And then in 2018, I did Earthworks, which is all about tower time. And it's divided into two parts. The first part are essays about where we are. Second part are rituals and ceremonies. Because I think if we can lay a ceremony on a particularly hard place in our lives, then it becomes either ordeal work, if it's really hard, or it becomes a rite of passage. And by giving it that significance and that weight, then we approach it in a different way than it's just like, oh my God, this pain in the ass thing I've got to do. It's so terrible. If you can translate that within your own spirit as this is an ordeal that I am going to test myself against, then it changes everything. But when the election happened in November, and I woke up middle of the night I usually do have to go pee. A lot of people have to do that. And I check the results, and we have the results of the election. I just posted a picture of Earthworks because in that book, I talk exactly about what is happening right now. And that not only myself, but many other people have been talking about the times that we are in as the times when these top down systems are imploding, and they'll implode so far and then they stop and recalibrate and then they implode a little more. And that's where we are right now. Anybody who is familiar with tarot and understands the meaning of the tower or the falling tower, they know that is exactly where we are. So I really recommend people who are fearful of the time that is our time to take a look at that book or to go to my website, which is myvillagewitch.com. And you can read the original documents for Tower Time, and it just lays it all out that now is the time for us to build the new world. As the tower falls, we are to take the stones of the tower, and we are to make a beautiful walled garden and fill it with organic soil and grow beautiful produce and feed the people. We are not to wring our hands and go, oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We should know what to do. We should listen to our hearts, and we should know what to do. But the fear will stop us. Fear, boy, while we're doing our sci-fi thing, we started out with the sci-fi. Fear is the mind killer. There's no question. Now, he understood that. He understood that fear will stop you every time.
So, yes, thank you. First of all, for explaining a little bit about your other work, but also about touching on the concept of tower time, because I did make a note, and I had told you in the pre-interview that I kind of wanted to touch on it a little bit, but we did get distracted talking about Star Trek a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Romulans forever.
Yeah, right. So, okay, well, Byron, I am in just a minute. I'm going to have to ask you the signature question here, but before I do that, I do want to just open it up and give you a space to say where you'll be in the future, how people can find you and get in touch with you and stuff like that.
Okay, well, I've got a pretty good touring season so far. I'm going to be at Pagan Unity Fest in Middle Tennessee. I'm going to be at Mystic South in Atlanta. I'm still doing book tour things for the new book, so I'll be around that. I'm coming to Starwood. I will be at the Delmarva Pagan Pride, and lots of other things that I can't think of right now.
What about social handles, websites, contact info?
I do a lot of work on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram and Blue Sky, and it's just my name, Byron Ballard.
Okay, awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to collect links to your books. I'm going to collect your social links and those festivals that you mentioned. Really cool. You definitely are getting around to some very cool festivals, some that I have not made my way to yet and hope to in the future. But I'm going to get all those links together. They'll be in the video description below. So anybody looking to learn more about Byron Ballard, all you have to do is go down there and click, and you'll get access to the info. So, Byron, it is signature question time. How do you use sound or music in your personal magical practice?
Oh, okay. Often. I use sound. I'm a chanter. I do a lot of chanting, and we do a lot of dance in our rituals because I also founded a goddess temple, Mother Grove Goddess Temple. But because I was not allowed to listen to anything but classical music until I got into high school, so much of what moves me is good classical music. So I will let you know when I wake up and I'm feeling puny and sad and I don't think I can make it through the day. Here's my playlist. I start with Fanfare for the Common Man, and I might have to listen to that one twice. And then after that, I go to the complete Carmina Burana. And then I finish with Beethoven's Ninth, and I put the fourth movement on loop. And at the end of that, I can tackle anything. And so it's funny when people will ask, so what's your playlist? And I hear other people's playlists and I go, oh, no, mine starts here and it ends up at Beethoven. And yeah, so that's me. And the new book, Feral Church, ends, spoiler alert, it ends with the group that's been on pilgrimage at Silbury Hill in England. And they sing the final verse of Beethoven's Ninth. They sing that beautiful poetry, Ancient Goddess Joy, we greet thee. And they sing it aloud as the moon is rising. So, yeah. So I use it a lot, all the time.
Very cool. I love that. Very interesting. I also was not allowed to listen to secular music growing up. So a lot of my influence also comes from the classical side, especially as a musician, even in the songs that I write. That's where I will draw a lot of influence from. So
I'm hearing that you and I, when we meet, we need to do some gospel singing.
Oh, yeah. Let's figure something out. That could be fun. Yeah. Yeah. When you repurpose a little gospel song as an intentional chant for magic, it's very fun. Yeah.
Yep. We'll do that. We'll figure out 15 minutes where we can sing. That'd be great.
Okay. All right. Let's do it. All right. Byron, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. And I had a great time talking with you. So thank you. And I will go ahead and end our call here.
Right. So, thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye. Another great interview and another big M3 thank you to Byron for taking the time to be with me on the show today. If you haven't already grabbed a copy of her newest book, A Feral Church, or even some of her older books, be sure to go check out the links in the video description below. And while you're there, maybe grab a ticket to Summer Magick Fest 2025, where you can see both Byron and me in person. I have a big favor to ask. Please make sure that you like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you enjoyed the video, maybe even leave a comment below. When you do those things, it actually tells the algorithm that my videos are worth recommending to other people. And that really, really helps me out. Now, you can also follow me on Facebook or Instagram at Eric Arcadian. But if you really want to help support me making more content in the future, the best way to do that is by going to my Patreon page. Patrons get exclusive access to these interviews before anyone else, plus some other cool content too. Remember, there's always a way to make music. Until next time.